so through all of this, gut health, diarrhea, all the rest of it, I have had to just kind of soldier on because stopping isn't an option. So what brought me to the carnivore diet? Today I thought I'd go through my history. I've never actually done this. I've talked a little bit about how I ended up on carnivore, but I haven't actually gone through my story, I guess, and so I thought I might do that today for those who are interested. So if I go right back to the beginning, I was born in Glasgow, in the tenements in Glasgow, and my mum was also born in Glasgow. And when I was born, my parents, their health probably wasn't great. I know my mum was sick a lot as a kid, and my dad was having some health issues around the time that I was born. And I've done a little bit of research into Glasgow and life expectancy, different studies that have been done. And the first one that I came across a few years ago was talking about how at that stage the life expectancy of men in Glasgow was only in their 50s somewhere, and women were just a few years longer, not a whole lot. Life expectancy has increased since that time in Glasgow, but still the life expectancy is a lot lower than the rest of the UK and even the rest of Western Europe. Glaswegians have the lowest life expectancy out of the whole of Western Europe still. Now, that first study that I looked at, what they put it down to was that the people who were born in the tenements have potentially problems with immune system stuff and are more susceptible to oxidative stress just due to their genetics with the overcrowding and everything. I think probably also from what I've seen, just heavy metal contamination of the land, societal pressures, a whole bunch of things. And so I've come out of stock that's got some kind of dodgy genes, as I always put it. Now, when we shifted to New Zealand, I was only little when we moved to New Zealand, and life here was definitely healthier. My mum and dad both got healthier here, and I'm guessing that I did as well. But even as a little girl, I had a lot of kind of sickness. I was had tonsillitis a lot and had my tonsils out when I was 5, and so I was on antibiotics a lot when I was little. And so I used to have a lot of problems with constipation and tummy aches and all of that sort of thing. And I used to catch tummy bugs quite a lot, right through until my probably late 20s. I used to get, if there was a tummy bug going, I got it. Now, when I was little, I remember I'd have tummy bugs, and then I wouldn't want to eat after I got better because I wanted to lose weight. So that was another thing that was always a thing for me right from when I was little, and I don't know why, that I always thought that I was fat, and I was a bit overweight. I was a chubby kid, and I was a chubby kid back when most kids were skinny. So this was New Zealand in the 1970s was when I was at school, and there were almost no overweight children. I remember at primary school there was one boy and one girl that were fat at school, and they were fatter than I was. So they were the two chubby ones, and then I kind of always considered myself to be the third one down. There was probably some other chubby kids around that I didn't kind of see as being as chubby, but I was. When I look back on photos, I was a little bit well covered, put it that way. So at primary school, I had constipation. I was always had this awkwardness around other people. I was shy, they talk about shy, being, she's just shy. And I don't know if I was like that when I was really little or not, but I don't know whether it was the just stuff that happened in life, shifting, family stuff, and then the gut health kind of issue starting. I'm not really sure. But I kind of figured that it all contributed to my shyness. And so when I was at primary school, I had the constipation and a lot of tummy pain and anxiety. If there was something different going on at school, I'd feel really sick and wouldn't want to go to school. I had that pretty much every day, but it would just get worse if there was something else going on. And so Mum would take me to the doctor, and the doctors would say I was constipated and send me home with some laxatives or something delightful like that. And so it went like all the way through primary school. Now I remember when I was a young teenager, I used to have a lot of bloating and a lot of gas. And I remember going out with friends, and because I used to wear the tight jeans, and I'd come home and I'd have so much pain, cramping, because I was full of gas and I'd been hanging on till I got home. And that was really, really common. Then in my late teens, so I had my daughter when I was 17, and after I had her, I had a lot of the digestive issues just kind of ramped up, and I was at A&E often with just abdominal pain and vomiting, and if there was any tummy bugs, I'd still get them. But every time I went to the hospital, they would examine me and they would check me all out, and they'd usually send me away with some antibiotics and some random explanation they could never kind of work out. They would check out my appendix and all that sort of stuff. They could never kind of work out what was going on. At the time, I was living with my daughter's father, and our relationship was pretty volatile. So as I said, I had my daughter when I was 17. He was basically an alcoholic, and he was only 2 years older than me, and we'd been going out since we started going out when I was 14 and he was 16. So I was with him for a few years. And he used to drink a lot, and after I had my daughter, he would, it was very common for him to go to work and I wouldn't see him for maybe 4 days, and he would come home eventually and he'd be drunk, and he'd come home, wake me up, want me to make him something to eat, and we'd end up fighting, and he would get borderline violent. His father used to beat his mother up really badly and put her in hospital, and so he was always determined not to do that, but it was very close with him. And I used to say to him, go and prove that you're like your father, and that would stop him. But there was a lot of volatility in the relationship. I remember one day he had a friend there and they were drinking and they were drunk, and he wanted me to make something to eat for them, and so I did, and he wasn't happy with what I made him, and he threw the plate with the food from the lounge into the kitchen, and it went through the kitchen window, and there was just food, baked beans and stuff everywhere. And that was the sort of thing that used to happen in our relationship. So I think that contributed to my gut issues probably back then, the stress of living with him. He wouldn't give me money I needed money for formula and nappies and things, and he wouldn't give me money. I'd have to borrow money off my parents for my daughter. And so it was just all quite messy, and then we split up eventually, and that was a blessing. And I met my hubby about a year later. That we've been married ever since. So that was a stress that was kind of early on in my life. And then when I was a kid as well, I remember, like as I said, my weight was always an issue. I remember I weighed 11 stone when I was 11 years old. And so 11 stone is 70 kilos or 155 pounds. Now, I wasn't very tall. I'm still not very tall. And I was worried. I remember worrying back then that I was going to go up 1 stone for every year of my age. Because I don't know, I was a kid. That was the way I thought, because I was 11 stone and I was 11 years old. I thought, well, when I'm 12, I might be 12 stone. When I'm 13, I might be 13 stone. When I'm 16, I might be 16 stone. And that's pretty much what happened, because I wasn't in that linear fashion. But when I got pregnant with my daughter, I went from 9.5 stone up to 16 stone. So I gained over 6 stone when I had her, which is a lot of weight. It's about 40 odd kilos, I think. And So yeah, and then when I split up with her father, so I actually gained more weight after I had her. And then when I split up with her father, I lost a bit, but I didn't lose heaps, but I lost a bit of weight. So then when I was a teenager, I also experimented a bit with vegetarian diet, because as I've said in other videos, my dad was a vegetarian and he was a big influence on me and the way that I thought about food and diet. And so I experimented off and on with vegetarianism, but I was also a real junk food addict. Absolutely, right from when I was a kid, I was addicted to sugar and carbohydrates. Our diet when I was a kid wasn't the best. There wasn't a whole lot of processed stuff in there because that didn't really exist in New Zealand back then, but anything stodgy, carbohydrates, sugar, I was into and addicted to. I remember more than once eating until I actually made myself physically ill, like on Christmas Day and things like that, where there was less supervision. I would just eat and eat and eat and eat and eat until I vomited. And so I think that I had this kind of carbohydrate addiction, eating disorder right from when I was little. I was really obsessed with food, and as a young adult I remember being conscious of the fact that I was always thinking about what I was going to eat next, always. And I would gorge myself, especially if there wasn't, when people weren't around. I would absolutely gorge myself. When my daughter was young, I used to bake a lot, and I would just eat and eat and eat biscuits, slices and things that I made. And that was the reason that I baked, was because I wanted to eat them. I was just craving sugar and flour and stuff like that, and so that's what I would do. Now, my interest in healthy diet started when I was in my 20s. So this was after I'd met my husband and I had my son, and we had moved to a little town here in New Zealand called Martinborough, where we lived for a couple of years before we went to Australia. And I started to get interested in health and healthy eating, and so I was jumping on different new things that were out, like soy flour and soy milk, I think, at that stage. I was one of the first people I knew to buy a microwave oven, and because it was healthier cooking. I remember cooking cakes in the microwave oven, which turned out this really weird texture, but I still ate them because they were full of sugar and flour and all that good stuff. And we ate a lot of vegetarian meals back then as well, because meat was expensive, and so we didn't eat a whole lot of meat back then. We shifted to Australia when I was 25, and but before we moved to Australia, I'd been still back and forth to the hospital and the doctor with abdominal pain and all the rest of it, and I actually ended up on a drug for 2 years before we left. I was prescribed the drug when I was about 23, and it was called Tagamet. So Tagamet is an acid inhibitor, and the reason that the doctor prescribed that was that he suspected that I may have an ulcer. I was never checked out for an ulcer, but he suspected I might have an ulcer, and so he put me on this acid inhibiting drug to see if that helped. And it did. It helped with the symptoms. Absolutely, it got rid of the symptoms. But I think it may have helped to set me up with all the things that have been going on ever since. So I stopped taking Tagamet after we moved to Australia. So I was 25 at that stage, and because the doctor had said to me that I should be all right to come off it because I'd been on it for a couple of years, and I should be all right to stop. But of course, once I stopped, I started getting sick again. And that was what kind of led me onto the path of natural health and herbal medicine and all that sort of thing. So I stopped the Tagamet, and I started using slippery elm, which helped with my gut a bit. And at that stage I kind of started to really lose faith in doctors, because I'd been backwards and forwards my whole life with all of this digestive stuff going on, and they hadn't managed to find what was wrong or help. So I started to kind of take things into my own hands a lot more then. I still used to go to the doctor occasionally up until the point that I was about 30, I guess, 29. And since then I very, very rarely ever go to doctors. Once every few years. I can probably count on one hand or two hands the amount of times I've been to a doctor since I was 30 years old, and I'm going to be 60 in a couple of months. So before we went to Australia, the other thing that happened was that I had a tubal ligation, so I had my tubes tied because we didn't want to have any more kids. And then when we got to Australia, the first 5 years that we were there, my health really, really deteriorated. So I became morbidly obese. I was suffering really badly with digestive issues. That was when I started restricting different types of foods because I was trying to work out what was making me ill. The first thing that I stopped having was dairy, when it was probably actually the wheat. But stopping the dairy did reduce my symptoms. I was also having really bad anxiety and panic attacks. I had quite a long period where I couldn't look at people when I was talking to them. I couldn't make eye contact with people. I used to wear my sunglasses all the time because I couldn't actually look anyone in the eye. It was the most uncomfortable, horrible feeling. And so when people say that, you know, somebody wouldn't look them in the eye and so there must be something, they must be up to something dodgy or whatever, that's wrong. Sometimes it can just be extreme inner discomfort, because it was with me. It was just like this amazingly uncomfortable, panicky feeling, and I just couldn't do it. I was kind of like that up until I was in my 40s, really. Had patches where I wasn't, but I still remember having that issue for quite a long time, just in a minor way, but not as bad as it had been when I was younger. My cycle was all over the place. My periods were horrendous. I used to bleed so heavily, and so I had all of this stuff going on, and I was almost agoraphobic. I didn't drive the car for 5 years. If I could have not left the house, not left home, I wouldn't have, but I had kids, and I made myself go out, but I would let my husband do a lot of the stuff. I would stay in the car if I could, and he would go and do shopping and bits and pieces sometimes. And when I looked into things later, I think now that there was a couple of things that were going on then that had set me up for all of this. One of them was that drug, that Tagamet, and the other one was having my tubes tied. There's a thing called post-tubal ligation syndrome, that where it can kind of almost put you into like an early menopause, and that's almost what I felt was going on. That it was like my hormones were really out of whack. Everything was out of whack, and so everything just continued to get worse and worse and worse until just not long after I turned 30, and I was also a smoker back then, smoked cigarettes, and I got to the point where I'd have to go to bed every night at about 7 o'clock at night because I couldn't breathe. And if I couldn't smoke, I couldn't stay up. I was such an addict. And so I'd go to bed at 7 o'clock at night, and because I couldn't breathe anymore. And so when I was 30, I knew that if I didn't change something, I wasn't going to be around for a very long time. And I wanted to be, because I had young kids. And so one night I decided to quit smoking. And so I handed the cigarettes to my husband. I said to him, I'm not smoking anymore. He didn't believe me, because we'd tried quite a few times since we'd been together to quit smoking. But I did quit, and within a day or two, I just felt completely different in myself. So I've come to the conclusion there's something about my body that doesn't handle some of these toxins very well, and smoking cigarettes was something that my body was really struggling with, the chemicals that were in the cigarettes. I mean, I have other family members who still smoke, and they're in their 50s and they're still fine. But for me, when I was smoking cigarettes, for example, I couldn't smoke and drink coffee at the same time. I realised after a little while it would give me these horrible heart palpitations that would last for like 20 minutes, like an arrhythmia, where I felt like I was going to die. And they started when I was really young. They started when I was about 18. And I eventually worked out that it was the nicotine and the caffeine together. And so it was easier to quit the coffee than it was to quit the cigarettes. And I also couldn't drink alcohol and smoke at the same time, because I could have one drink or two, but it would make me feel really horrible. And so when I quit smoking when I was 30, the feeling, the difference within 24 or 48 hours was just amazing. And so what happened was I started exercising because I felt so good. And so I started doing aerobics, and then I started doing other forms of exercise, riding a push bike and doing aqua aerobics and walking, and I kind of became a bit of an exercise junkie and was pretty much an exercise junkie for close to 2 decades. I had a few years where I would exercise 4 or 5 hours a day, and that was all a bit over the top and crazy. But what happened ultimately was that I lost about 45 kilos in weight, which is about 100 pounds. And so I went from like a size 24 down to a size 8. I had people in the street not recognize me because I had changed so much. And it was only when they saw hubby that they'd go, "Oh my God, Sue, oh my God, you've changed. Wow, you've lost weight," because they didn't realize it was me. And so my anxiety and panic and my hormonal stuff and everything got a lot better while I was thinner. And it was still there. The panic attacks weren't, but the anxiety was still a little bit, and the digestive issues was still there a little bit. But everything just got so much better, and because I was young as well, I guess. And then we moved to the Gold Coast. So because I was really focused on my health with the exercise, I was losing weight and everything. I don't remember making any conscious decision, but I kind of drifted into a vegetarian diet, and then I became fruitarian, and then from there vegan. And so that was when I was in my mid-30s. The other thing that also changed when I quit smoking and become an exercise junkie was that I quit smoking, I took up exercise, and I took up drinking. And I don't think I was drinking a whole lot to start with, but as I lost weight and started to get a life back, I started driving my car again, and was working, and I was studying, and then I was working, and started to get a life, and our social life started to increase. And so I started drinking too much, and we were drinking pretty much every night, and then the weekends we'd drink a lot. We'd go to the pub, or we'd go to barbecues or socialise in the weekends, and we had quite a big social life because our kids were teenagers by then, so we could leave them at home, because that was the other thing, was I'd never had any kind of real life when I was young because I was pregnant at 16, and so this was in my 30s, and my kids were older, and we were like, yeah, let's go party. So that's pretty much what we did. And so we would go out, as I said, we would go to the pub, we'd go to different people's barbecues and things, and we'd go out and drink and dance and have fun. And we had motorbikes, and we joined a bike club, and so we'd go to the bike rallies and things like that. It wasn't unusual for me to drink 2 bottles of wine in a night, so it was way too much alcohol. And the too much alcohol lasted for probably 25 years because it became a habit. Part of what was going on was because I still had this anxiety and discomfort around people. The only way that I could actually feel relaxed was when I had a drink. So everywhere that we went, if I could just have that first glass of wine, I was fine. And that continued right up until about 2 years ago. Before Carnivore, we actually did a protocol where I was taking MMS, which is chlorine dioxide, and we were taking it hourly, 8 hours a day for a couple of months. Hubby had psoriasis at that stage, and that was why we decided to try it. It's very controversial stuff. But what happened was, for both of us, is our desire for alcohol lessened lots. So that was obviously something to do with gut microbiome, I'm assuming, that changed. And so I laid off, just didn't feel like drinking anymore, which was great. So I still have a drink occasionally, but not very often, and I'll usually only have one if I try and have two, I don't feel like it, and end up tipping it down the sink. So, which is absolutely perfect. So my poor old liver is probably finally recovering. And I think that has been, I know that that's been a big part of what's gone on with my gut and everything as well. That's what I was going to say. When I became vegan when I was in my mid-30s, so we were drinking a lot then as well. And the vegan diet was just the start of my gut health really going down the tubes, and my anxiety and everything really coming back in full force. So we'd moved to the Gold Coast, and I was eating a vegan diet, and I remember my anxiety it was ballistic. My job was quite stressful. Life was quite stressful, to be honest, down there. And so we were down there for 2 years, and everything just kind of turned to shit. I was still thin. I thought I was healthy. I've talked about this in another video. I thought I was healthy. And people around me thought I was healthy. I looked good. And yeah, I was slimmer than I'd ever been in my life. But I was an anxious mess inside. But I'm pretty good at hiding that. And I know that because people say to me, you don't look like someone who's anxious. I'm like, yeah, I've got really good at hiding it, because the anxiety's been there my whole life, right since I was little. And so, yeah, I manage it, and that's just the way that it is. So I was vegan for 2 years, and then I went back to a vegetarian diet, and I was vegetarian for over a decade, and then started eating meat again 15 years ago, trying to resolve some of this health stuff and anxiety. I had gradually put weight back on again, and but managed my weight. Like, I never got as big as I had been in my late 20s. I think the heaviest I'd been up until moving back to New Zealand this time I'd been up to about 89 kilos, I think, was my heaviest, and a size kind of 16, 18. But I averaged size 14, sometimes down to a 12, just depending on life and what I was doing. So that was all kind of managed until we went back to Australia, had a really stressful year in a business there that we bought that failed, and that just kind of exacerbated everything. My health, my anxiety. I ended up with the overactive thyroid after that, 2 years, I think, after that. And it feels like I've been trying to recover from that ever since. Not the thyroid, just that year in that business. It really impacted my health. And then when we moved back to New Zealand, I had 4.5 years in a mouldy building here in town. So it's just been like this accumulation of things. And I gained, after I'd been in the mouldy building, I gained a whole stack of weight really, really fast. The first year that we were in there, I went up to about 115 kilos probably, and was really unhealthy, had skin rashes and all this gut stuff going on, and the anxiety side of things has been mental. And because the other thing too that I haven't spoken about is that I'm the income earner in our house, and I have been for 23 years. So my husband he had an accident in the year 2000, and he hasn't worked since. So through all of this, gut health, diarrhea, all the rest of it, I have had to just kind of soldier on, because stopping isn't an option. Because if I stop, then we don't eat and we don't have a roof over our heads. So the stress of it all, everything has all played a big part as well. And as I've talked about in some of my other videos, having constant diarrhea every day and the anxiety around that has been pretty huge. As I said, 15 years ago, I started eating meat again, but I've still, in between times, have still been highly plant-based. I would eat some meat, and then I'd go back to vegan. I'd go back to this raw vegan diet, because I kind of had this weird belief that had to be the ultimate healthy diet, and that it was going to help me lose weight. And so I'd, get back into that, and because I could make all these sweet treats, with lots of almond butter and cacao and avocados, things like that. Actually, I'm really good at putting stuff like that together. And so I would I'd go through periods of eating meat and then periods of being a vegan, and none of it really made any difference. It didn't make any difference to how I felt. My health just kind of continued to do a downward slide. And so then I decided to try a keto diet, and I kind of played with keto a few times, and then I decided to try that. I did 2 months straight on keto, doing it properly, but then came across the carnivore diet. And my daughter had mentioned carnivore to me maybe 3 or 4 years prior, because she was thinking about trying it, and I just at the time dismissed it as absolute mental crazy restrictive meat only diets, like what the hell. But then when I came across it on keto, it was actually Dr. Mindy Pell's interviewing Paul Saladino, and it kind of made sense to me, and it was the only thing that I hadn't tried. I mean, I've tried everything. I've been vegan, vegetarian, I've been on the starch diet, I've tried the, years ago, egg and grapefruit diets, I've been to Weight Watchers, I've done the bread diet, I've done intermittent fasting, and everything you can think of, GAPS, I've done the HCG diet, everything. If there's a diet out there that you've heard of, I've probably tried it. And so because this was about, over the years, it's become not just about my weight. It used to be when I was younger, but then it became about weight and health. And it felt like every time I tried something, I'd get a bit of result, and then it would just slide backwards again. And I mean, really, I've eaten a really clean diet for years. I've eaten very little in the way of processed foods, high plant-based fruit and vegetables. Like, my fridge was always chocker full of fruits and vegetables, and the only processed foods would buy some tinned tomatoes and things like that. Almost nothing. I've been a avid label reader, ingredients, for many years. I'd drive my husband nuts in the shopping in the supermarket, because I would read the labels on everything all the time to see what the ingredients were, because companies have a habit of changing ingredients. I've been gluten-free for years, avoided corn like the plague for years, and yet with all of my diligence, my health was still continuing to deteriorate. So when I heard Mindy interviewing Paul Saladino, I decided to try carnivore. I thought I'll give it 30 days. And the changes that happened for me in those first 30 days made me convinced that I was on the right track. And so I'm almost 18 months later, and there's definite improvements on this carnivore diet. But I'm still trying to work out my gut health. I think it's getting better. I mean, my diarrhea is definitely better, although it doesn't take much to upset it still. And with the research and the things that I've been looking at just recently, I've come to the conclusion that it is about gut flora. And so that's where I'm digging into, and I'm just about to add, or I'm just in the process of adding some fermented foods back into my diet, and to see where that leads. So I'll be doing some videos on that, and on the flora, on what I'm doing very soon, and the results that I'm getting, because I think that there's a couple of things that I've overlooked over the recent years when I've been trying to work all this out, and I have a feeling that I'm on the right trail now with the carnivore diet, but just with some tweaking to fix my gut flora. So that's where I'm at. So this is how I ended up on the carnivore diet. I think that's it. That's my life history. If you've watched until now, you've done well. If you've got any questions or comments, please fire away below. And if you like this video, make sure to subscribe. and hit the like button. And I thank you very much for watching, and I'll talk to you again another day. Goodbye for now.